This is sort of what an overview of that whole system looks like. Your actual work, all the conversation that you have, fills up about 70 to 80% of any context window. I would argue that it's important to keep it, especially if you're using the 1 million token context limit, keep it under 40% max. When you hit that 40% load, dump it or compact it or start a new conversation. Personally, I like to keep it one conversation per task or group of tasks. It's up to you how you manage this, but it's much better, in my opinion, to save your work and make sure that the project state is up to date and then start a brand new conversation. And that'll give you a good sense of how well you're managing your context, because if you can't go from the end of one conversation to a fresh conversation in that same project and still get quality results, then you're doing something wrong and you're not giving the agent all of the tools and information that it needs in order to pick back up fresh. You should be able to start fresh and see the same continuity that you would if you had not left the conversation. When you are managing longer conversations, because sometimes you have to, sometimes it's easier and sometimes it just makes more sense, it's important to make sure that you understand what is going into these contexts and what's going into this conversation. You can also, throughout the process, do save points and checkpoints by telling it to simply add something to its memory or save it to the Claude MD. But once you start to get towards that middle ground here, right before you're starting to hit that sweet spot of 30 to 40% of context used, this is when things start to get lost. This rolling context window, it's not immediately obvious to a standard user, but you'll start to notice Claude will start repeating itself, or its responses aren't as good, it's pulling in threads from other areas, and it's starting to become obvious that it's getting confused. And you'll see that context degrade over time. At the beginning, you'll see it be good, and then at around 350,000 area, that's when you start to get in there. I mean, 50,000 tokens is not a lot, but the 200,000 tokens was the hard limit. It wasn't even full 200,000. The auto compact used to hit at 80%. So it was 160,000 tokens, and then it forced you to compact. You start to see these warning signs, multiple unrelated projects in one session. You get a long Claude MD file. It starts to reference outdated information or just general degradation in response quality. That's when it's important to compact. You can /quit and start a brand new session, or you can do /clear and then have it read the Claude MD again. Now, one of the ways that you can get around this, or one of the ways that you can mitigate this, is to use subagents. Now, subagents, as you've seen, are usually called in when there is a large or complex task that is needed, but I don't think it's always obvious exactly what these subagents are doing or why it's useful to use them. There's a couple of different reasons why they might be useful for you. Number one, the context. Each subagent, whether it's using Opus or Haiku or Sonnet or any of the lower models that you're using for your agent, each subagent has its own fresh, brand new context window. And this is really useful because it doesn't eat up any of the existing context for your main conversation. So if you've already used 100,000 tokens, you can launch subagents with their own 1 million context window to go off and do a specific task. And it does that task, and then it reports the results back to your main orchestrator agent or your main conversation. Now, this is great because, again, it doesn't use the context or the tokens from your main conversation, but it also doesn't necessarily have all of the context from your main conversation. It only has the set of instructions that your main agent or you have given it, and it goes off and it does its task, which is why it's important to make sure that your subagents have one job and one job only. But even when they are doing that job correctly, it's still possible to have a game of sort of agent telephone happening where the subagent goes, it reviews the documentation, it performs its work, it reports back the results of its task to the main agent in your conversation, and something is wrong, or it got some detail, it messed up some little minutia there, and then that agent in your main conversation has no idea that that's wrong. So that error, that little mistake, then gets carried over to your next conversation and your next, and it compounds. So it's very important to keep an eye on that and not to automatically trust the subagents. But if you're in a situation where you are eating up tokens too quickly because you're having your main agent do everything in sequential order, subagents can be really useful. The last thing I'll talk about with this is the double escape. You can restore a conversation and rewind it back to a point. Let's say you hit a context limit, or you are just not getting any good results, or you made a decision that you want to revert. You can double tap the escape key, and it will give you a menu that will allow you to rewind all the way back up. The only difference is once you've compacted, you're no longer able to rewind past that compaction. So again, this is why I like to start a new conversation for each designated task or workflow. I don't like to just stack them or chain them together because I feel like it limits your options to rewind or revert if you run into those issues.